I'm Nadav Zohar. I'm part of the Human Factors team at Pontiac in Dayton. And yeah, thanks for having me. I've really been looking forward to this. This is actually the same topic I had such a blast presenting last summer at Product Camp 2015. And it's called Righteous Tech. So let's see if my clicker works here. I'm stuck behind the podium. So the word righteous, a lot of people think it means something like a
Yeah, maybe everyone take a quick
So it was designed to. Okay.
That was instructive. The word righteous sometimes makes people think about a kind of feeling of superiority or self-importance. But there's another definition that I'm going for here, which is just acting in accordance with one's values. And so that's the gist here. So I'm going to explain why it's so important that we design in that way, and I'm going to propose a process to help us do just that. So think to yourself for a second whether this statement is true or false, whether there are things that you care about and you'd want to teach to your kids or that you hope other people are teaching to your kids. And if you answered yes or true to that question, there's probably some values, whether it's love of your country or just good manners or whatever else, that you'd like to see preserved into the future. Sorry, I'm working off paper notes here, so I gotta keep up. Most people have some of these values, and a lot of the most important ones are shared by most people. You might even say that's kind of why society works. And I think that fact is pretty uncontroversial. So that uncontroversial fact, combined with two others here, basically makes up a kind of understanding of why we need this kind of a design process. So these other facts are kind of uncontroversial too. I'll briefly go over them. So technology changes our interactions, our expectations, our habits. It can actually change our neurology. There was a researcher named Eugenia Ives out of the Dominican University of California who did a literature review where she went over all the different ways that digital devices impact teenagers. And she came up with no fewer than 11 different categories of ways in which their brains are changed. Their brains and behavior are changed by digital devices. And one more kind of general example of that could be something like phantom cell phone vibration, if any of you have ever experienced that. So that's where you hallucinate your phone vibrating or ringing in your pocket just because you feel some kind of tap on your skin somewhere. So that is actually literally your brain rewiring itself to interpret that signal as somebody trying to get in touch with you. And it's all just based on the fact that you're used to having a cell phone. So on a large enough scale, if you scale that up, what it turns into is a change in the values of a society, in the things that we consider important, the way we do things, that kind of stuff. And we, the technology designers, make decisions about the stuff that we're creating. It's part of the nature of our work. So the stuff we end up designing is the result of a series of intentional decisions, or at least it's supposed to be. So again, this is pretty basic to our field. Jared Spool, I don't know if people know, he's sort of one of the gurus of user experience design. Maybe staples were bad. But the problem is that when we're not being deliberate in the right ways, then staples were bad. Then we end up designing things that can change or destroy or threaten, compromise values we'd like to have seen preserved. So we're supposed to be rendering our intent, not rendering these undesired new changes in the society around us. And designing that way without any deliberate effort to be intentional is not responsible. So here what I'm proposing is a process, a way to be more intentional and thus more responsible in our design. So let me back up a second and explain why I'm talking about values in the first place. What do values have to do with design? The word values even kind of has an old-timey vibe to it. So I got clued into values actually by learning about the Amish, who in a very visually striking way have taken control over their technology decisions. Now, contrary to popular belief, the Amish don't just think technology is evil, and they don't reject all technology that was invented after like 1908 or something. They actually will accept technology as long as it is something that they feel will support the values that they want to preserve as a community. And a lot of the time they'll accept the technology but require that it be modified in some way. And I think this was a pretty sharp move. A lot of the time, when we're adopting technology, we adopt it because of what it promises us, the features, the specs, the kind of experiences that it's going to afford us. And we're not thinking about the ways in which it could change us on a deeper level or change our society on a broader level. For example, I want to show you this iPhone commercial.
This is iPhone 6S. Not much has changed, except it responds to the pressure of your finger. So you can peek into stuff. And pop stuff open, which changes how you play a song. Read a text. Read an email. Read the news. Wait, you read the news? Yep, of course you do. Now you can change apps like this. Pay at more places like this. And the new color looks like this. It's rose gold, it's awesome. And Siri is more helpful than ever.
Hey Siri, show me photos of tortellini.
Here are some images of tortellini. Maybe get takeout? The camera shoots 4K video now, which changes how your movies look. Nice. Even selfies have changed. Now your screen is the flash. That's gonna get like 1 million likes. Hey. Actually, photos themselves have changed. They move now. You just touch them. So yeah, that's what's changed.
So it's all features, it's all specs, it's all promises about the stuff that this new phone will allow you to do. There's nothing about how it will impact our world in any deeper sense. And actually, the only hint, the only clue about any of that is found in this tagline, but I'm not even sure it was put there deliberately. So, of course, our society is enormous, it's diverse, and I'm not proposing that we should all become more like the Amish. I'm not even necessarily saying that that would be a good thing, but there's one subset within our society that's kind of uniquely positioned to make those same kind of deliberate, intentional decisions about technology. And that subset is us, technology designers. So let me address an obvious objection right up front. Is this kind of thing even doable? Is an entire industry going to adopt a brand new process that has a kind of abstract goal with results that might not even be obvious or might not be clear for a long time or might not even be measurable? But then again, we kind of already do this in a lot of ways. For whatever reason, we rally around big ideas. We're a very conscientious kind of people, the people who come into technology design. In fact, I took a survey of a pretty diverse group of people, ages in the 90s to in their 20s, all kinds of educational backgrounds, different occupations. It's not a representative sample, it's not a huge sample, but it's diverse enough to kind of give you an idea. I asked them to list out their values on a scale of 1 to 7, and then I weighted the responses and tallied them up. And as you can see, they all kind of agreed on one value, but then it very quickly dropped off and tapered off to little loner values that were straggling. And then I gave that same survey 3 different times to roomfuls of people involved in technology design. And actually one of those was last summer at Product Camp. And I overlaid the graphs from each of those 3 times. over each other. But you can kind of see there was more agreement over some, like 3 or 4 core values, and then it tapered off like it did in the first case, but the tapering was much more gradual. So like I was saying, there's a lot, relative to society as a whole, we agree on a lot. So, sorry, let me find my notes here. And so, I'm proposing this process for us to start being more intentional about the impact of our designs in the world around us. Now, this process is meant to be carried out by a team within the normal context of product development, within that same, and it should fit right into that same development timeline. And to see what's in the process, why don't we actually walk through a kind of a mock project? So I need 4 volunteers to kind of be the team. And don't worry, you're just going to be writing a very small amount and talking a little bit. So 4 volunteers. Just why don't we come up and sit at this table?
Sure. Do I need something to write with?
I brought pens.
Okay.
How about 3? Can we go for 3? All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Makes this work out perfectly.
I guess there's only 3 kids in there.
I think all the decisions. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
So here, I'll some sticky notes, some pens. Okay, so the first step is, as a team, to declare the values that you consider important. These are the values that you would kick yourself if you had a hand in destroying them or compromising them. So,
Do we have to agree, or do we write down our own?
well, we're going to do this as, so the first step is done kind of as a silent brainstorming.
Okay.
So you each take a sticky note and maybe write 1 to 5. And 5 is an arbitrary number. It could be 3, it could be 7. I think 5 is a nice, good number that gives you a good amount of values to work with.
Personal values or company values?
These are the values in society that you would be mad at yourself if you had some kind of hand in destroying, or the values that you would want to see preserved in the future. Okay, so while they're doing that, why don't the rest of us kind of come up with like a product that we can apply this to? Any, it could be something realistic, something maybe you're working on, you don't have to be too specific. Something you're interested in, just any kind of product that we're going to develop. This is product
A wind turbine?
A wind turbine? Okay. And let's come up with some features of that product too. So what, normally we'd have our list of features that differentiate this wind turbine from other wind turbines. Can we just come up with a few of those?
Quiet.
Quiet wind turbine, okay.
Do you want me to write on the board?
Oh yeah, perfect. Thank you.
That means I don't have to shout out ideas anymore, you guys have to.
Efficient,
All right, I got 5.
What'd you say?
efficient.
Efficient, okay. Maybe one more.
Like some kind of low economic or like environmental footprint.
I would say that.
And I can't remember if I asked you guys to put those 5 values in order.
Yeah.
You could just write 1 to 5 next to them in whatever order you think they should. From most important to least important, with 1 being the most important.
I'll just switch on one.
So while we're talking about features, I just want to make sure we understand the difference between efficient and low environmental footprint. Are we all kind of clear on what that difference exactly is?
Well, efficient, because you could still be efficient and still do damage to the environment process, right?
So maybe we're talking about a specific kind of efficiency.
Right, more efficiency of performance, where we're actually talking about what actually is being outputted by the turbine, which is energy.
Output, right?
Yeah.
Efficiency is about output. environmental footprint is more about damaging the environment.
Exactly, that's the result, that's the reaction.
I'm just trying to be a little bit realistic about how we.
Although I don't know that that last one's a feature, that's more of a,
It's
more of a goal.
because that's actually, that's a benefit we
What,
gain.
what could be a feature that would support that goal?
I've seen features, the similar like low impact on the environment as for a piece of equipment, so it's a legit.
We could, yeah. I think like it's the common discussion of what's the difference between a benefit and a feature, right? If we have a car, the benefit is that it drives me to A to B. The feature is that it has all-wheel drive.
Yeah, because you could sell somebody on low environmental footprint. That can be a feature that you would promote to someone and say, this is different than other technologies.
So maybe if this is kind of like the benefit that you're selling, the feature that exemplifies that is it's constructed out of renewable materials.
Can we say that?
Yeah. So materials.
Well, if we're looking at a differentiation of a new wind turbine, one of the difficulties with them right now, or negative aspects, is they're very expensive. So we do a low cost.
So maybe recycled materials could have a lower cost because they don't have to be, well, I guess they still have to be sourced, but maybe recycled materials are cheaper, something like that. Okay. So I use the term values bundles up there, so now I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Everybody here kind of know the story of King Midas?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a king. He was granted a wish. He valued gold a lot. He really wanted wealth and gold. So he said, well, make it so everything I touch turns into gold. And for a while, things were going great. He would touch his table, and the table would turn into gold. He'd sit on his throne, and his throne would turn into gold. He was quickly becoming a very wealthy guy. But then he went to eat dinner. He was hungry, and his dinner was gold. He couldn't eat it. He went to hug his wife, and she turned into gold. Quickly, he realized that actually, this is terrible. Now he has nothing. He's basically doomed himself. So, values bundles are designed to prevent this kind of King Midas problem. You have a prime value, which is like the things you guys just wrote down. And then there's conditional values, which are the things that actually, in certain situations, this is actually more important. So, to give you an example, openness is something that a lot of people in my surveys have responded to as an important value. Maybe even you guys, one of you have written openness. Openness is a fine value, no problems with it. But there are situations where you might not want openness. Like, you might not want to have to be completely open about every little thought you're having. Some of your thoughts you might want to keep to yourself. If you run a company or own a company, you have IP that you don't want to have to be open about. If you live in San Francisco and you have a kid who you're walking home from school, there might be like an old nudist hippie who you wish he'd be a little less open about his body. So those scenarios have emergent values that would be the conditional values. So like things like privacy, security, or decency, or whatever it ends up being. So for each of well, let me get into the next step actually. So, going back, now we will go to our spreadsheet. So now we're going to tally up the values you guys actually wrote down. So, we actually only have 3 people, that's fine. Anybody want to volunteer to go first?
Yeah.
Tell me their values.
So number 1, freedom.
Okay.
2, honesty.
Okay.
3, trust. 4, reward. 5, work or performance, however you want to phrase that.
And we'll come back to some of these if we see that some of them are a little bit similar to each other. We want to parse them apart or lump them together. Who wants to go next?
I can. So I had compassion,
Right.
integrity, generosity. I had industry, which I think is similar to work.
Production, some for production.
I'll just have work for now.
And then respect.
Okay.
Trust, honesty, respect, truthfulness, and thankfulness.
Looking at these before we go on, are there any that we want to lump together?
I think truthfulness and honesty are kind of the same.
Okay, so because truthfulness and honesty, do you want to pick a new one? You want to do over on your number 4?
I'll just throw out the word integrity. I mean, maybe that.
Yeah, would you want to swap it?
Yeah, integrity would fit that one, yeah.
I'll do that. Okay. Any others?
I'd say that's it. They're all generally different enough.
Okay. So let me actually bring this guy back up. Oh, I have to move all the way down there.
You guys are good. Those are good.
Okay, so I'm just gonna get all the unique values here. I already got word. Respect, is that already one? Trust is there, that's right. Honesty is there, respect is there, integrity is there. Okay, so now we get a weighted and unweighted table here, and we can put them in order from the highest one to the lowest. So I like to do by weighted. I'll just copy that over to my rotator.
So the weighting is just the order in which they
Yeah.
prioritize them?
That's correct.
Yeah. So 1 is at the bottom, 4, there's a 2, 3. Okay. And this will give us an ordered list of values for this team.
Oh, you can't do a sort. Oh, it's a PDF, not an Excel sheet.
It is an Excel sheet, but I don't trust the way Numbers does it. It's kind of kooky sometimes.
Okay.
In the past, I have tried just the automatic sort, and it just goes bonkers on it. So again, this is something you could do in the normal lean coffee style, just by, you guys would all write your values on separate sticky notes, and then you'd each get your vote of however many, and put your votes on them, and the one with the most check marks on it or whatever is the top value. But here we get honesty and trust and integrity. So honesty is going to be the top prime value, and then we can think about conditional values for honesty. So what are some conditional values for honesty?
If telling one of your staff members the ugly truth might destroy their self-esteem and then make them tank a project, who knows? I'm not saying the worst case scenario, but.
So that's one scenario. And what is the emergent value from that scenario?
From the worst case scenario?
The one you mentioned.
So if I tell someone the truth and their feelings are hurt and they don't do the project, so the effect of that aspect.
Yeah.
So the effect is I either can lose the worker, I can lose the job, I can lose the result, I can lose whatever was originally he was doing, and then he just stops because he couldn't take it or what have you.
Quality, if we're talking about a product.
Yeah, person quality.
Maybe an outcome, some kind of desired outcome. I don't mean to steer you guys. As a team, we would all participate in this kind of conversation.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear is, honesty has to be balanced by empathy. That, the honesty, you want to be honest, but there's going to be times when, you have to balance that, where it's a time and a place.
Either that or the way you deliver honesty is the other important factor.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about honesty in terms of our features back there. If we cannot be quite as environmentally great as we want to be.
Oh, well, you're jumping ahead. We will get to that.
Okay.
Well, this how so this goes back to, if we go back to the chart, I think where did respect fall? Respect fell where?
Respect was.
So respect fell 9th. Okay, so it's even on the weighted score. So that could be
We started at 4 though.
Yeah.
right. So that so respect fell 7. So that's like 6. Or 6. That's an example of something like right. So like you could be honest as long as the condition will be if the worker knows you respect them, then the honesty won't hurt as much because they know it's not coming out of anything of sinister or malice, but instead of
You don't want to be honest to the point where you're disrespectful.
or you're disrespectful.
Well, there's the other top value there was trust.
Mhm.
So there's also a level of trust.
Trust
I mean,
between
the more trust you have, the more honest you can be with each other.
Right.
Whereas if you have a low level of trust, you're gonna want to couch your words, or you're not gonna believe what they're saying, or
Right.
you think that when they're really being honest, you're gonna think they're just being manipulative. But high level of trust, people would say, hey, you screwed up here. I was like, yeah, you're right, and let's do better.
And I can trust you with this information, I can trust you, that you're not gonna, go off the rails.
Yeah,
And we start to see that a lot of these values are kind of tied together, and there's a lot of research actually about that. There was a paper, I can't remember the author now, but they actually highlighted this kind of continuum of values based on various types of things. So trust and empathy were very close together in that kind of pie chart or whatever, or the wheel. But 3 is good, but you kind of get the idea of why this is important so that we don't get carried away with honesty and blow off other things that are also important to us. So then, let me get back to my PowerPoint. So the next step of the process here is to evaluate the features using the values bundles. So ordinarily, this list of features would probably be prioritized, so we take the most important one and look at it. So let's say it's efficient, according to high output, right? And so we can look at, okay, what are some scenarios where this could support or compromise that values bundle? And the first step is just to look at, does it support honesty? Or does it compromise honesty? And it may be irrelevant. You may say, well, I don't see how honesty has anything to do with output efficiency of a wind turbine. In which case, yeah.
So, sorry, I didn't interrupt. I mean, we saw a great example of Volkswagen recently. They wanted to have a high output car while meeting the environmental regulations of the countries they were selling in. And so they programmed the software to deceive the government testing systems so that then they could provide a higher output engine.
Did they actually provide a higher output engine?
Yeah, they did. So, I mean, because they provided more horsepower when it was, I guess the fuel efficiency went down, so it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, it had a higher performance but lower fuel efficiency as a result of the software, the programming that they did to it.
Yeah, okay, so in that case, the feature, and we're in Volkswagen land now, the feature that they were trying to promote might have compromised that value.
Yeah, I mean, they had 2 features, fuel efficiency and I guess you could say environmental record, and then a high performance, high horsepower engine. And the only way they could combine those was by deceiving the regulators and their customers.
Mm-hmm.
So they compromised honesty in order to pretend to deliver both those features.
Right, and that's an interesting example.
So come down to the team wanting to see, as it's turned over to the marketing side, credible, technically supporting and defensible claims.
Right.
That's what we want to do, is develop something that's a breakthrough, and then somebody presents with all kinds of fluff, it's challenged, the work is destroyed. So it's credible claims support. Right?
I would say, let's imagine for the moment that we are able to provide that feature without having to lie about it. Maybe think about some other kinds of questions, such as, these kinds of questions are just sample questions that I've kind of come up with over the last few months to introduce a multifaceted conversation about this. So it starts on a small scale. How would this feature impact a particular user? And we can talk about who the user is of a wind turbine. Is it the operator? Is it the people who get power? Is it, I don't know, whoever else? But thinking about how a wind turbine could, well, maybe let's decouple from wind turbine for a second and just think about how the internal impact of the thing you're designing, or what that internal impact would be on the user. How it would change their habits, their expectations, their ways of thinking about things. And then moving out a little bit, how it would impact their interactions with other people, with other products. So eventually they're going to get done using the thing that you designed and built for them, and they're going to go use something else. Is the thing that is the interaction you gave them going to influence the way they interact with other people or other products? And then thinking long-term about in the future when they're done using the thing, or how the impact of your thing on a future, I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't sound really hokey, but the impact of your thing on future generations. And I don't necessarily mean like somebody throws your thing in a dumpster and it leaks out and causes somebody to be poisoned necessarily, but just, the quote, here's a quote, and I can't remember who said it, actually. It was by a guy who was a sci-fi enthusiast, but not a sci-fi writer, but he said, and I'm paraphrasing, anybody can imagine the car, but it takes a real mind to imagine the traffic jam. So kind of this long-term thinking about impact. And then change equals loss there is actually a quote from Kim Goodwin, who is another kind of UX guru. But that's another thing to think about, is that with every piece of technology we adapt, we give something up. So what is the user sacrificing? What are they amputating to adopt the new product that's being designed? And yes.
Would you have a Blockbuster?
Right. Or with a wind turbine, maybe people are going to give up some other kind of technology that produces power, or that produces thrust, or whatever kind of wind turbine this is. So anyway, that's step 2. And thank you, team. You guys were great. That was good job. Round of applause for them. They're not done. I mean, you guys are done. The team in this process is not done, because these questions, as you notice, are pretty difficult. They are big, weighty questions. And to answer them, it's going to take more than just some people sitting in a room. You have to grow the conversation out. And obviously, a first step would be to involve your client representatives or your product owners, whatever you call them. Your pilot users are an obvious pick too, but by no means should it stop there. Even a widget sitting in a room that gets used by one person can impact a lot of people, because that person can be changed by it and then go and interact with other people, and those interactions are influenced. So definitely crowdsource the heck out of this step. And actually, I have a thought experiment. Raise your hand if you have an opinion on designer babies. I'm not going to ask you for your opinion.
You know what now?
Designer babies.
What's a designer baby?
So like,
Where you go in and choose the traits that you want for your test kit.
Yeah.
So do you have an opinion, any opinion at all? I'm not going to ask you for it. I just want to know if you have an opinion. Okay, I see 6 hands, 7 hands. Okay, and now raise your hand if you're actually involved in the genetic engineering field. I don't see any hands up. See, that's pretty cool, because there's this wider group of people who are thinking about the impact of that technology, thinking about how it could affect them in the long run, about its consequences for society, and they're building up a kind of theoretical framework for what kind of things could happen. And that's really awesome. Feels like
Somebody said awkward?
no, awesome. I said it's awesome.
Okay.
Feels like, and I mean that not in the dumb sense of the word, but the actual awesome sense of the word. Feels like genetic engineering and artificial intelligence are doing pretty well at this. They've taken these kinds of conversations so seriously that there's whole categories of organizations just committed to thinking about these kinds of risks and ethics and so forth. And of course, when they start making sci-fi movies about your product, then you know you're really doing well. But yeah, that's the point. You want people thinking, what if? And that's really what to expect out of this. You know, complex systems involving humans and causality and stuff like that is impossible to untangle. It's incredibly difficult. Risk is hard. it's just as impossible as predicting the future. But laying down a theoretical framework, building up a vocabulary, a way to identify potential problems, and then making decisions based on that knowledge is, as soon as it's available, is totally doable. And it's the correct, the ethical and responsible thing to do. So, as I said, and as you can probably tell, this is a proposed process. What I'm asking of everyone here tonight is to actually try it out on your next project and help me refine it, and maybe eventually we'll rename it. But what I want to see what kinds of things bubble up for questions like these, for example. So, what is the best way to prompt for values bonus? You know, we kind of went through scenarios. I don't know if that's actually the best way to do it. I want to know how much impact this kind of process actually has on people's design decisions. I want to know if pass or fail. Oh crap, I forgot to mention that. So as we were in step 2 talking about how evaluating features based on values bundles, the idea there was to get a kind of qualitative sense of how it evaluates, not to actually get a score and just have a simple score saying, okay, well it got a 3, so we're going to knock this feature off or whatever. It should be a thing where all what you get out of it is this qualitative sense of how it holds up. And then based on that, you can decide to keep the feature or not keep the feature or modify the feature. But at the end of the day, what you have is a better sense you have better information, and thus you're being more deliberate. Sorry, I forgot about that earlier. But I want to know if pass or fail is a good way to do that, or some other type of grade, some other type of score. And I'm kind of curious to see if some general guidelines emerge out of this as people think about how to design for preserving values. And I hope you'll agree that if nothing else, it'll at least increase the level of intentionality and deliberateness with which we design things. So,
Can I make
yeah.
just an overall comment? Is my experience is that I don't think most people in most organizations, I mean just my experience, so it's anecdotal, have really gotten together and said who we are in terms of values.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just not done.
Yeah.
And so
Generally, outside of Amish communities, we don't think about it too much, which is why I included step 1, which is a way to kind of hammer that out and get that first thing first.
And you know, the Volkswagen thing is easy to shoot holes at, but you know, if they had an environment where everybody was present to their values, and if they had an environment where the truth could be told without holding it against people, that would not have happened.
What's interesting is that gets into the meta. Who's responsible for the environment, Volkswagen or the people around them? Because you could argue if the government just stayed out of the way and offered them all the freedom in the world, that also wouldn't have happened either. But there's no reason why.
Yeah.
So like, who's responsible for the environment?
Right. And which is why I said these complex systems are impossible to untangle. But the best we can do is get more information about what we think could happen, what could be the outcomes, and act on that. So, you guys have been awesome, by the way. I want to leave you with some food for thought. In 2012, some organizations got together and conducted the American Values Survey. And what it was a telephone survey of, I think, a little over 2,000 adults. The adults themselves were a representative cross-section of adult America. And they asked them things about, they didn't ask them what their values were, so they weren't doing step 1 of the process. But they asked them about how they thought values were changing and about what they thought about values in certain areas. And there were a couple things here that stood out to me. One was that nearly half of people expect values to weaken. So current American values to weaken over the next 10 years. And what's interesting is that that includes the 18 to 29 age group. And then the other thing is that it's true, a majority of people are more excited than nervous when they read about a major scientific advancement. But look at which group is the least excited and the most nervous. It's the 18 to 29s. It's the ones who are most active on social media, on web apps, and on the kind of stuff a lot of us are designing. And these are the people who will inherit the society that we're designing right now. So it's easy to look at the world and come away thinking that designing in accordance with values in order to preserve certain things that are important to us is a doomed experiment. But a quick reality check against what people believe and what they really want tells us otherwise. We care about what gets passed on to future generations. The stuff we build has a real impact on them, and we have control over that design process. So let's give them something they can be excited about, and that's righteous tech. So thank you for listening. Are there any questions?